Hello, this is Bruce Wan, Head of Research for MaxCap. In this video, we review some of the recent proposed tax reforms for the Australian property market and ask the most topical questions. What are the likely impacts for property markets? Who are the likely winners and losers? And how will investors respond to these tax policy changes? The Commonwealth Budget, released in May 2026, contains some major pieces of tax reforms, including some meaningful changes to the previously untouchable segments of the Australian tax system, being capital gains tax and negative gearing. The capital gains tax for existing property changes from a nominal cost base with a 50% discount to an index cost base with no discount and a 30% minimum tax rate for working age taxpayers. Buyers in new properties will have a choice of tax treatments. Meanwhile, negative gearing, tax deduction for loss-making established investment properties, will only be offset to future rental incomes and capital gains, rather than current earnings. Landlords of newly built properties are exempt from these changes. Importantly, the old negative gearing arrangements are preserved for existing landlords, so we will see no immediate impacts for the 1 million or so taxpayers currently claiming this benefit. Most of these changes will not come into effect until July 2027, so there are no tax revenue impacts today, but we will likely see some behavioural impacts as investors reposition themselves for the next financial year. As expected, these proposals are generating a fierce political backlash. While political commentators will work through the likely electoral impacts, we can consider the likely property market impacts. Taking the broadest perspective, the new capital gains tax arrangements will have more detrimental impacts on venture capital strategies heavily reliant on rare unicorns with outsized capital gains. The impacts are relatively more muted for income-reliant strategies like real estate. Within the property market, there are now clearer distinctions between newly constructed residential properties, mostly exempt from these changes, to owners of second-hand residential properties who will see reduced tax benefits and a higher tax bill in future years. Finally, it's useful to put these tax changes into a broader context. In aggregate, changes to capital gains tax, negative gearing, discretionary trust will only add around $7 billion of tax revenue over 4 years, mostly back-ended to 2030. To put this into perspective, the tax increase is relatively small when compared to the $13 trillion residential property market, with around $700 billion a year in capital gains, or the $4 trillion local share market with $200 billion of capital gains a year. In other words, the marginal increase in tax rates are not a lot, although there are a lot of distributional impacts to consider. For the most part, the budget is a game of give and take with clear winners and losers. Out of these changes, what are the likely investor responses? We'll likely see a shift from established to new housing. There are now clearer preferential tax treatments for newly constructed housing intended to support residential developments at a time of persistent housing undersupply. We'll see a shift from individual holdings to managed funds as well. While individuals are losing some of their tax benefits, these are largely preserved for widely held investment trusts and managed funds. Over time, investors will also refocus from capital gains to income strategies. A net increase in capital gains tax will likely see more investors moving to things like private credit and other income-based strategies. You can find out more about these proposed changes by reading our report online or talking to our capital team. This has been Bruce Wan for MaxCap.